we bought Andrew a custom bobblehead that looks nothing like him. And let's talk about discernment. That's today on the To Be the Church podcast. Welcome to the To Be the Church podcast, where we explore what it looks like to truly be the church in today's culture. I'm Tyler. Andrew's here. We have no Ben. Ben is gone.
Ben is gone, dude. Later, Ben.
He's out for a while.
He's sabbaticaling at this very moment.
I don't think we ever talked about a sabbatical on the podcast, did we?
Ben's?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't have any memory of it. But yeah, so he's out for the next 3 months. We asked him, we said, are you going to listen to Be the Church? And he said, probably.
What?
And I said, why?
I know.
Yeah.
So Ben, if you're listening to this right now, turn it off.
Yeah, go enjoy your family or something.
Yep.
Okay, so we did an episode a while back where we talked about your graduation from your doctoral program.
Yeah.
The actual graduation was just in the last few weeks now. And I didn't tell anybody this, but in that episode where we talked about your graduation, Ben gave you a gift, right? He gave you a stethoscope.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Wow, I really hope Ben turned it off so he didn't just hear that you forgot about his gift.
Yeah. Ben, I forgot. Who's Ben?
But anyway, that day when he did that, I was like, oh no. Because as a church, we had this plan. We actually had it. We just hadn't paid for it yet.
Yeah.
But we had this plan that we bought you a stethoscope that had the NGC logo engraved on it, and then your name, Dr. Andrew Murch.
Oh, nice.
And then he handed you a $4 one from Amazon instead, and I was like,
dude.
dang it.
Classic Ben wrecking things. Yeah.
So we ended up going a different route, and it turned out just about as good as the other one. So this is the Dr. Andrew Murch bobblehead. When did you start collecting bobbleheads?
Correcting them?
Yes.
I get them and I alter them.
Yeah.
No, dude. So that started back in my baseball playing days as a major A's fan. My first bobblehead was a Barry Zito
nice.
bobblehead. Yeah, a pitcher from way back in the day for the A's. And so I feel like I got that at a A's game or something. And, or no, my wife, I think, bought it for me like the year we were married, like almost 20 years ago. So, and then, dude, my second bobblehead ever, I had the Barry Zito one, and we were, first married. We were living out in Boston. We went into Harvard Square, which was like where we'd hang out whenever we brought like relatives came out or anything. We'd take them down and do a bunch of kind of Boston, Cambridge sites, and we'd go to Harvard Square and kind of walk around and show them Harvard and stuff. And in Harvard Square, there was like this gift shop, and they were selling a William Shakespeare bobblehead. And my wife's like, hey, it's like your Barry Zito, let's get it, So I got this William Shakespeare bobblehead, and then I had those two. And then I think when we moved back to the West Coast, like the first Christmas we had, my mom got me an Adrian Monk bobblehead for Christmas. Like, the show Monk, I think, was on at the time. And so I had those three, Barry Zito, William Shakespeare, and Adrian Monk, again, odd bedfellows, but they, and then from there on, I don't even know where they went from there, but then just like on birthdays and Christmas, my mom or my wife, those are kind of the two main offenders in that world. They would just get me bobbleheads, dude. So now I have and then it kind of became a thing, like when up at Evergreen, my old church, people would get me bobbleheads, just for random gifts. And then down here, people found out that I used to have them in my office, a bunch of them, here at the church. And then, so people found out I collected them, and then they just kept getting them for me. So to this day, I've never acquired a bobblehead on my own. They're all gifts basically. And so it's pretty much been almost 20 years of birthdays and Christmas, what my parents, my mom would just get me one, or my sister would get me one, or whatever. So yeah, dude, I have a lot of them now, an insane amount, kind of like when you walk into my study at home, which I don't let very many people into. You're like, oh, you're kind of a weirdo.
How many do you have?
Oh, well over 100. I mean, probably 150.
Okay. Some questions. What's your favorite one?
Dude, just what's my favorite one?
Yeah, your favorite bobblehead.
I don't play favorites, dude. No, I don't know, man. I got all the Office ones, which those are actually worth a little money now.
Oh, from the show?
Oh yeah,
okay.
yeah. Like the Dwight one, came out, and then they came out. There was a line of, they came out with all of them. So back in the day when the Office was on, people had gotten me those. So I have a lot of things like that where it's I got all the characters from The Office. I have all the characters from Breaking Bad and from Better Call Saul. You know, there's a bunch of historical ones, you know, like there's this line of like the presidents, you know, George Washington all the way to the, you know, I don't think I have a Joe Biden yet, but I have all the presidents that they've made, which they've only made like of the, 46 presidents maybe in American history. You should know that number. You're a big political plus historian.
Am I?
Yeah. So I have all those. So all but like, he's made all but like 8 of them, the guy who does that line of them. And then, you know, I've got like, there's like superhero ones that people have gotten me over the years. And, you know, like, yeah, bunch of sports ones. I have a Satchel Paige.
Oh, that's cool. Old school.
Yeah, Tiger Woods.
There's a Damian Lillard one behind you. Is that yours?
That is, yeah. So I don't know who gave me that, but I don't know. There's some that talk. Dude, I got a Karen bobblehead. Like Karen, like you're such a Karen kind of thing. For last Christmas, I got a Karen bobblehead, and you press the button, and she says like 4 or 5 different things. And so like you press the button, and she's like, pull up your mask. Like it's like all these different phrases, like Karen like phrases. And it's like a lady, and I think she has her hands like on her hips, and she's like looking at you all derogatory, and she's got like a short haircut. Pretty funny. So yeah. So anyway, a lot of political figures. I have like Queen Elizabeth. I have Mr. Bean. You know, there's like, yeah, there's just a ton of them out there.
Dude,
so
I'm going through my email because I want to tell the story of getting you this bobblehead. Because whenever we realized we couldn't get you the stethoscope that we wanted to, we pivoted and decided to get you a bobblehead of yourself. And so I ordered it, and here it is. It doesn't look anything like,
dude,
like
if the
Andrew.
camera's on that, for those people who've been around NGC for a while, it's Micah Cassis. All right, Sam Cassis, former pastor here, now pastor on the East Coast in Maryland. Yeah, dude. So, dude, this is a dead ringer for Micah Cassis, Sam's oldest kid. He's like 8 years old now. His face, that is Micah Cassis's head on that thing.
So when it came, I was like, oh, and it got here like a week before we were going to present it to you. And it was like, so I can't fix it yet, like, or before Sunday.
So you fix bobbleheads, right?
Yeah. I correct them. But the frustrating thing was, as I totally could have prevented it, because I get an email, like as they're making it, I paid $10 extra to have them like stop midway, send me pictures to make sure it was good.
Okay.
And so, but what I didn't realize is, when the halfway point is before there's hair. And so I can't find the picture. Otherwise I'd put it on the screen right now.
It's like a bald picture.
Yes,
of it?
It's a bald,
and
it's a guy holding it. It's like a cell phone picture.
So it's me in like 5 years.
Yeah. But he's like, hey, before I add the hair, this is where we do the confirmation. Like that, like, he's like, obviously like this is a caricature, not a portrait. So it's like, the features are more pronounced or whatever. He's like, but I need confirmation before. And so I look at it and I'm like, that doesn't look anything like him. And I'm like, it's probably just because he's like straight up bald. Like, you know, it's just whatever. So I was like, I think we're good. Keep going. Okay. And then it shows up and I was just like, oh, that was the wrong call. So we have a different company making a replacement now.
Replacement bobblehead. Replacement Andrew.
That gets better reviews. But yeah, I think we should probably, once we get the new one, we should at least put this somewhere in here, you know, the one that's not quite Andrew
I'll bring
merch.
the new one home to live in the bobblehead cave.
But I thought that was funny.
That's great, dude.
All right, what do you want to do? You want to talk about a question? You want to?
Yeah, we got a question here from a listener, and it's called Discerning Social Events. And I quote, I am a younger believer and have recently found myself obsessed on discerning social events I get invited to. I get so engulfed on whether I'm pleasing God or not that I've labeled all hangouts as bad because I'm more tempted to sin around people. In panic and anguish, before I do things, I quickly cancel or say I'm not going to in order to honor God. I've become, and he put honor God in quotes. I become so occupied by trying to not put myself in situations where I'm tempted that I feel like an outcast. Even by small get-togethers, I'm stressed and usually end up crying and asking for forgiveness after. Is this really how discernment is, or is this a problem? All I want to do is to do what God wants. And I said he, I don't know with this name if it's a male or female that has asked this question. So anyway, that is the question. Tyler, what do you got, bro?
Yeah, so if I was sitting across the table from this person and they just said this to me, The biggest question I asked is like, what's happening at these social events?
Yeah.
Because I think that's the biggest question that needs to be answered here, because it could be where it's like, hey man, like you need more godly friends.
Yeah.
Because if social events are causing you to cry and ask for forgiveness after, the biggest question I would ask is why? Is the reason because it's debauchery and like there's all sorts of sinful things going on, or is this more of something that you need to get over rather than run from, if that makes sense?
Sure.
So that'd be my biggest question, because I have heard teachers, preachers in certain seasons where they they had a certain experience and then they villainize that experience, and other people apply it to situations that are not the same.
Yeah.
And so like, let's say he heard a youth pastor or something say, parties in high school, like horrible, like nothing good ever happens at parties in high school. And what that youth pastor's probably thinking of is drinking and sex and drugs, and for high schoolers that aren't married and stuff like that, is like, obviously stay out of that. But then someone who has never even experienced that type of a party can think like 5 kids getting together to watch a movie and go to Sonic. Oh, I'm sinning because I'm partying, or whatever. Yeah. And that's a very stark example.
Yeah, all I can think of now is tater tots, but keep going.
But yeah, so I think that's the biggest question I would ask. Yeah. Are the things happening at these parties things that Bible has identified as sinful? Is that the stuff that's happening in these social gatherings that are even with you and only a few friends? Or is this something that that like you should feel free to partake and not feel like you're sinning because you're not? Yeah.
Is this the question that the person had here? Is this really how discernment is, or is this a problem? And my initial read of the question was like, no, this isn't discernment. This is more of a problem. Mm-hmm. And that was just, and I realized after hearing you respond, Tyler, that I'm maybe looking at this in not as clear of a way, because I think your response is great in that sense. For some reason, I didn't think of the idea that you shared there of like, oh, maybe there are really sin issues that this person's been dealing with in communities, big or small, and so they become more of an outcast. That's a charitable read of the question for sure. And I think to take your read, I do think there come seasons of time where they say they're a younger believer, meaning either a newer believer or maybe a believer that's in their late teens or 20s or whatever. And I do think that like there do come seasons where when you start serving the Lord, those old acquaintances or friends or people that like were the center of your community that were, kind of associations sort of built on sinful relationships or whatever else, that you can become kind of isolated from those and feel like you don't have anybody, because those relationships are kind of coming to their logical end when you start serving the Lord, and others just say, no, I'm not going to do that. And so you become an outcast. But this almost feels like, as I read it, that the person, there's this hyper sense of like wanting to honor God, and it's almost leading them into this monastic type of, I mean, going back in church history, there were like monks, a few hundred years after Christ that like would castrate themselves because they didn't want to deal with the temptation toward sin or whatever. So like, and I'm not saying this is on that level, but it's just like, it's a bit of the mentality of like, in the name of discernment, cutting oneself off from community because you're so afraid that you're going to like step on the sin bomb. And I do think that like, yes, your solution there, you need some solid Christian community. And also you need some solid kind of within the church, wherever you're at church, you need to join a good church where you can be an intergenerational community, where this is the type of thing that like a believer, and Ty, you and I are, I'm guessing this person's a younger believer, you and I are, I don't know if we're old enough to be the guy's dad, but like we're in our, you late 30s, me early 40s. But I mean, I sat with a guy who goes to our church yesterday, I spent 2 hours with, that's like going to be 75 in like a month, right? He's 30 years older than me. And just to spend 2 hours with that guy and get his wisdom just on anything. We talked about grief for like 45 minutes, and just the things that you learn from older believers. And this is the type of thing that running this by an older believer and giving some specifics to those situations, right? Specificity is really key here. Like, what are we talking about? Are we talking about where are you hanging out and what types of things are you doing that you think dishonors God. I'll pivot to like my own experience going through kind of the Pentecostal world in my late teens, then as I got into my 20s, the old school Pentecostal world and Tyler, you and I didn't necessarily grow up in this world, but our parents did if they were in the Pentecostal worlds at the time, was like, you don't play cards, you don't go to movie theaters, it's not only that you don't drink or you don't do these things, like you don't even go to movie theaters. And there was a little bit of that in the kind of world I was in my late teens. So I can remember going to college in Missouri, and the first year I was there, I hadn't been in a movie theater in like 3 years, just like I just hadn't seen a movie, because it was like, that was sort of in the groups I was in or the people I was connected to, it was sort of like, vilified a little bit of like, sure, there can be crap in movies that you don't want to subject yourselves to as like a young person and like guard your eyes or whatever, and discern that. But it's like, I can remember that in the first movie I went and saw at college was Remember the Titans. It was like the year that came out with, what's his name? Denzel Washington. Yeah. So, and that was like my journey back into the movie theater, right? But I can remember walking in the movie theater for that movie and just thinking to myself, like, man, this is a weird feeling, And I was probably 19 at the time, and not because I like had some super crazy, it's like I wasn't like condemning people for going to movie theaters, but it just was a thing for a few years there, from probably ages 17 to 19, where I was like, I'm not going to go to movies anymore. I'm not going to I got to be really careful about what I'm watching and these kind of things to avoid temptation. And you look at that and you go like, it's good to have zeal for the Lord. It's good to want to honor the Lord. It's good to, I don't want to look at it at somebody who's going, man, I really want to discern. I really want to honor God and like try to talk them out of that. At the same time, like you can, what you're doing and cutting yourself off from community is not healthy. And there are aspects of you can be an outcast. I mean, 1 Peter chapter 1, we're called like exiles in this world. There's an aspect to that, but we are also called into community and the discipleship and the mentorship and the fellowship that occurs in community is something vitally important for every Christian. And so I'd say, I'd circle back around just to where you started, Tyler, where it's like, you got to get in some good relationships with Christians. And then also, there's probably a fair bit of legalism and pride and moralism that can enter in, and it kind of reads that way a little bit here. And you got to be aware of that, because you're not saved by you staying pure. Like, you're saved because Jesus stayed pure and because he took that penalty for you. And that's not a license for you to sin. That's just the reality that like, it's not your own moral purity that saves you. It's Christ, right? And so, and you will sin. You're going to sin the rest of your life. And so learning to repent and believe the gospel over and over again is the key.
Yeah. And I would say if you are, like the whole younger believer idea, if, and this is true for everybody, but specifically if you're like a teenager asking this question, I would say like choose really good friends, like choose godly friends, choose friends that are going to spur you on to to pleasing God, because you're so worried about whether you're pleasing God or not. Hang out with people. And I remember in high school, like when I was striving after the things of God, I hung out with certain people. And then when I was running from that, I did the opposite, And so I'd say find those friends and do that. But
yeah, and I would encourage you to read Colossians chapter 2, read Romans chapter 8, probably 7 and 8 actually. And in there you're going to find a fair bit about, the temptation to sin, but then there's no condemnation in Christ and being filled with the Spirit, Romans 7 and 8. And in Colossians 2, you're going to read about like the fact of the temptation toward making our righteousness about the certain things we observe and the special holidays and all these things rather than about what Christ has done. And so Colossians 3 and 4 actually would be fairly good for you to read. Or excuse me, Colossians 2 and 3. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So thanks for this question. We love it when you send in questions because it gives us stuff to discuss here on the podcast. You can send in a question, podcast@tobethechurch.com. It was good hanging out, and we'll see you next Friday.